it, drop the bass. Now the heads.
The short answer is because it hasn't ever been tried, at least not on any large scale, but this will likely confuse people, so it's necessary to get into some of the terminology first, before explaining what I mean. So when I say communism, you probably think of places like North Korea, or the USSR as was, or China, yet none of these are communist nations. Communism is a stateless way of organising society where everything is held in mutuality between everyone. All these states that you think of as communist were supposed to be trying to achieve communism, but never did. There has never been a communist state, because that's an oxymoron. If you want to figure out whether something is actually communist or not, examine it and ask yourself whether there is still a state apparatus or whether everything is held in common. And that brings us to socialism. A lot of people also like to claim that these various nations are socialist. And that gets a little bit confusing. There are two meanings for the term socialism. One of them predates Marxism and is that of socialism as its own ideology. The other is the Marxist meaning of socialism. In Marxism, socialism is a transitional state between capitalism and full communism. It's a stage at which, according to some interpretations, the state takes full control of everything in the name of the people, and then works to wither away the state and hand it out to people. This is where things appear to have gone wrong in all of these revolutionary states. As power concentrates in the hands of the state, just as under capitalism it concentrates in the hands of a few plutocrats, it seems to inevitably lead to corruption and power in the hands of too few, and that's where the wheels tend to fall off. But that is the Marxist interpretation of socialism. Everything in the hands of the state, everything controlled by the state. That's Marxist socialism. Socialism as its own ideology is a fairly broad set of principles under which many different interpretations exist, but it's based around three central principles: the belief in equality, the belief in a limited state as an administrator, and the elimination of systems of control, and the prevention of those systems of control from emerging. Socialism, in this sense, is wildly successful. How can I say that? Well, virtually every first world Western nation, even America, has some aspects of socialism within it. Socialism lies behind the ideas of equality before the law, and it lies behind ideas like the welfare state, which have massively improved people's lives all around the world. Socialism in this sense is not incompatible with private property, it is not incompatible with individual rights, it is not incompatible with the market. It's just a different emphasis and way of doing things. And countries which conform to these socialist values tend to dominate the Human Development Index, happiness indexes, and seem to be the best way that we've come up with so far of aiding and accomplishing human flourishing and happiness by providing for all. So a big problem that we have is that Marxists insist on the Marxist meaning of socialism, and far-right people insist on the Marxist meaning of socialism, which leaves all the genuine socialists kind of stuck, constantly having to try to explain themselves to one side and refute the other side, and this is incredibly tiresome. Which brings us to the current favourite whipping boy of the right and the politically illiterate, Venezuela. Hugo Chavez attempted to turn Venezuela into a Marxist socialist state. A Marxist socialist state with a South American twist, Bolivarianism. And he pretty much succeeded up to a point. He got as far as socialism, Marxist socialism, which is where things always tend to go wrong. Now, poverty rates had peaked at around, this is extreme poverty rates, had peaked at around 45% under his predecessor. and under Hugo Chavez the poverty rate dropped to below 10%. By any measure, that is a huge success. He brought in all kinds of social programs and massively improved the state of life for the vast and overwhelming majority of Venezuelans. This is something that is praiseworthy. This is what a lot of people internationally on the left praised him for doing, and it's hard to fault that. For a long time, this was okay, this was successful, but the entire thing hinged on the value of petroleum, Venezuela being a big producer of oil. When the bottom fell out of the oil market, suddenly the country was rendered pretty poor. This also happened at the same time as a drought and various other issues. Venezuela, as a ostensibly successful example of socialism, had problems internationally because politically they'd become marginalized. So you have all of these problems stacking up, along with an attempted coup against Hugo Chavez, ostensibly backed by the US. This doesn't let the regimes off the hook by any stretch of the imagination, because they failed to diversify their economies. They relied completely upon one product. Of course, the predecessor regimes did exactly the same thing. So this isn't any problem unique to Hugo Chavez or to Marxist socialism in South America. It's just shit. They should have done something different, and they didn't. Maduro is a different creature entirely. He's not really a populist. He is Stalin to Chavez's Lenin, if you want to draw that kind of historical comparison. But by no stretch of the imagination is Venezuela any more even a Marxist socialist state. It's turning into a totalitarian regime, and that's something different entirely. So, in short, communism really has never been tried. Marxists attempt to bring it about via Marxist socialism, and this fails. But Marxist socialism is completely different to socialism as its own ideology, and that has been wildly successful around the world. The failures of Marxist socialism in places like Venezuela has zero bearing on the massive successes of socialism as its own ideology across the Western world, in the First World nations, and most especially across the Scandinavian area of the world. Some of the happiest, most equal, most fair societies on Earth. Old Fat Punks is part caper, part comedy, part nostalgia, and part commentary. It follows three aging punks as they build themselves up for one big, nihilistic last hurrah. You can buy Old Fat Punks at Amazon, Drive-Thru Fiction, or Lulu.com. Follow the links below or search on those sites.